such an honor to be here and to present for the Future Forward Speaker Series. My name is Julia Dupire, and as mentioned, I lead AI integration at Edelman. So really on the agenda today, before I dive in, I really want to take a moment to acknowledge who's in the room here. I think you're all the future of communications, and we're at this vital point where AI is really defining how the trajectory of this field is going to evolve. And so with that in mind, I also understand that there might be some fears around, what job displacement might mean for you. And so I think that this is really supposed to be about thinking about what the opportunity is for you as you enter the workplace. So the problem at hand is really AI and how it's shifting the dynamics of trust as well as the information economy today. And what I'll be presenting is the solution that we've come up with at Edelman and how we're bringing AI offerings to market. To bring that to light a little bit, we're going to be speaking about generative engine optimization. And then I'll be closing with going back to you and what you can do with your future as communication professionals. So diving into the problem at hand, really the moment that we're in today is, on the one hand, understanding how AI is transforming not only the way that we're absorbing content, but how the content itself is created. Never before has there been so much content readily available to us, because the speed and infinity of content is meaning this extreme abundance. And what that means for us is that actually we can no longer really trust the content that we are exposed to. How do we know what is real information versus not? And so what we're seeing is that algorithms are no longer just filtering what we're seeing, but they're actually shaping what we believe. When we think about trust, so Edelman actually has a trust survey called the Trust Barometer that we do annually. And in the most recent one, we've seen that we have this trust dynamic that's leading to insularity. Now, what that means is that we've gone from a state of polarization. So we have economic displacement as well as a rising cost of living and AI fears that have led people to have confirmation biases and live in echo chambers that have increased polarization within our societies, that then leave people into a state of grievance. Grievance means that they believe that the system that they're in is rigged against them. And that ultimately leads us to insularity, which is where we're at today. Now, this is quite concerning. And I think that especially as we're thinking about the use of AI, a lot of the time we see this confirmation bias, right? Like ChatGPT is always going to tell us, oh, yes, like that's a great point, and perpetuating that. At the same time, there's a study that was done at MIT that showed that conspiracy theorists that were fed certain algorithms were actually more willing to accept information that was debuting their conspiracy theory, because AI allows them this neutral language that they can interact. And so information is being absorbed in a different way. I think this speaks to both the opportunity with trust and AI, as well as the risk here. So the core tension when we think about what trust means in society today, and especially as communication professionals, is on the one hand, we think about it from an individual standpoint and what that means for our personal lives. But then from an organizational standpoint, we can think about what does it mean to be introducing AI within an organization and having adoption within an organization. And then also for brands, how can brands be thinking about how they connect with their consumers and how trust is going to be a vital part of that. So what I've seen in my role is that introducing AI to a people-driven industry is really a tremendously difficult thing to do, because the way we communicate is seen as so innately human. And with that, we don't necessarily want to be having machines be an interlocutor in that connection in between let's say, a brand or in between two individuals, right? Additionally, we also see concerns around misinformation, job displacement, and brand erosion. That's both from the internal standpoint, from like an agency, as well as brands towards their consumers. So there's a lot of fear here, but what I also want to really anchor in today's conversation is the opportunity that arises from AI. And if I think about my own role, it didn't exist 5 years ago. And even within my role at Edelman, when I started in August of 2024, we were 10 people. Now we're 965, which is an astronomical boom. That's also because we absorbed the data team, but it shows where the focus is for the future. And I think that that's something that I really want to be connecting with you about, is thinking about how can you be leveraging AI as you're building your careers and as you're thinking about trust. So I'll dive into what in the world it is that Edelman is paying me to do. And essentially, we're thinking about how do we embed trust and how do we think about bringing solutions to market in this trust crisis that we're finding ourselves in. And so we started with isolated AI experiments. One that I think was really interesting, and actually that speaks to how trust can be created with AI, is for an erectile dysfunction medication, which was one of our clients. And what we saw is that a lot of men have a very difficult time speaking to peers or trying to understand how a product works. And that was a huge issue for the brand. And so what we created was a generative chatbot that allowed them to have conversations regarding this sensitive topic. So I'll show a video.
I think we all can agree there's a handful of conversations that we just don't want to have. But number one on that list, in my personal opinion, is ED, or in other words, erectile dysfunction. And trust me, I get it though. Nobody likes speaking about their troubles in the bedroom, but that conversation just got a little bit easier with Eroxon. Eroxon is the first FDA-cleared ED treatment that's available without prescription, and it's clinically proven to work within 10 minutes. But the conversation becomes a little bit easier with Ed. Ed is a new and innovative AI chatbot trained to help navigate all questions you might have with erectile dysfunction in a discreet way, of course, because this is a safe space, fellas. What's also great is that Eroxon is effective in over 60% of men, and it's shown to work for men with mild to moderate ED. So my personal opinion is something to consider. All in all, fellas, you can't be one to avoid one of life's toughest conversations. But Ed by Eroxon makes it a little bit easier. So if you're wondering how to bring up erectile dysfunction to your partner, Ed has the answer.
So this is obviously a very unique use case for AI, but I think that it speaks to a really cool thing, which is thinking about how to create a safe space when it comes to the use of AI and how we can be communicating. Also thinking about this, it was all about governance, data privacy, as well as making sure that we are generating reliable answers to all of the questions that were being put into the chatbot. And in order to do that, we built it on a lot of proprietary data that was focused on product specifications, as well as also leveraging psychological documentation about how therapists are taught to speak to patients about ED issues. I think that's a really unique way that we were thinking about building projects early on. But what we saw was that in bespoke solutions, it just wasn't scalable. So I think I was really excited about working on things like this, but ultimately Edelman is a massive firm and we were not able to meet demand when it came to these types of experiments. And so we had to move to larger commercialized AI solutions. And so that's what I'm really going to be moving into. And again, I want you to be thinking about not only what you can be doing on a project to project basis. And I think that early on in your career, that's a really exciting place to start with, is thinking about how you can be working, let's say, with one client, or how you can be incorporating something that's a little bit more creative into the use of AI. But ultimately, we also have to be thinking about what can scale, right? And so some of the solutions that I've worked on bringing to market have been generative engine optimization. I'll be diving into that in a little bit. Otherwise, we have synthetic audiences, which is essentially how can you be A/B testing your content before you go live with it. A subset of that is AI personas. So how do you build archetypes based on the data that you have on your target audiences? Media monitoring allows us to understand how a brand is being perceived across different platforms. And crisis simulation is also really important in today's world. It allows us to proactively identify if a crisis is about to occur. And so we can be responding to it before it actually occurs, which, especially when it comes to crisis, this is one of the most difficult parts of PR. And so being able to have a proactive strategy is vital. So why am I diving into generative engine optimization in today's talk? On the one hand, I want to be providing a little bit more of a granular understanding of what an AI solution looks like to all of you. Also, I think that this is one of the most in-demand solutions currently. And also, there's so many things happening in this space that I think you really should be aware of when it comes to the way individuals and brands are thinking about trust and how individuals decide whether or not they're going to trust a brand. So generative engine optimization is also known as AI search optimization, or I mean, it has a variety of different like naming conventions, but really what it is the next generation of SEO. And it's thinking about how a brand is perceived on LLMs. So how does your brand show up on a ChatGPT, for instance? And how can you be best structuring your information to make sure that you're showing up the way you want? So if we take a look at the trend of search, we can see that it's been declining, which is expected, and it's actually expected to decline by 50% by 2028. And this, of course, is due to the rise of LLMs. What's also interesting to note is that if you look here, it doesn't amount to 100% because overall search is expected to decline. The reason that it's expected to decline is that the way people are searching has shifted. So we're not just looking at keywords on Google. We're now looking at very specific prompts that are niche to our interests, to our specific life situations. And so the responses that we're getting are much more tailored, hence we don't need to be doing as many searches. With this in mind, we also see that there's a decrease of 60% in actual, only 40% of Google searches end up having a click. Now, this is due to Google AI mode giving us kind of that understanding, even when we're just using traditional search, but also the use of enterprises with LLMs has led to this stagnation or decline of traditional search. And when it comes to actual users and how we're thinking about the, leveraging AI on a day-to-day basis, based on the trust barometer, 55% of people are using AI daily. As expected, this adoption is mainly in younger demographics, so Gen Z and millennials. And 91% of the people that do use AI daily are using it for shopping. Now, out of curiosity, for everyone in this room, who would not be using AI for a major purchase, if anyone? Okay, let's hear some reasons why. I'm just curious.
For a major purchase, I think trust.
You wouldn't trust AI?
Not for a major purchase.
But you wouldn't consult AI even?
Consult, yes, but not like.
Yeah, you wouldn't blindly follow.
Yeah.
That's a smart move. I would agree with that. That's probably what you want. Yeah. But what I'm also curious about is understanding which LLMs do you trust, right? Like, I'm curious if anyone wants to share, but there's so much going on in today's world. I mean, people have a lot of fears, especially around OpenAI. But I think, that's the most widely adopted LLM. We also have Anthropic, which is not releasing a model currently because they have fears about the impact on society. And so I think that shows, for me at least, that they're a more trustworthy LLM provider. But to what extent does that actually impact the way that we think about shopping and we think about using these LLMs? anyway, those are some questions I want you to keep in mind. For brand, how they show up is vital. So looking at the company Oatly, we saw that there was a sales were down 5% in 2024. And the CEO essentially said that this was because it was not it was getting biased responses on LLMs. So if you search, is oat milk healthy? It was essentially pulling fragmented science and wellness trends and saying that it was unhealthy when like realistically this wasn't really the case, but it had a actual impact on their revenue. Ultimately, from the standpoint of Edelman, I saw a massive opportunity here where we have interest from brands, but then we also want to make sure that we're building a strong and cohesive solution internally. Now, this meant also that we had to deal with certain political frictions for actual adoption of AI. But ultimately, what we were able to do is leverage the various experts that we have and have a certain synergy amongst them in, oh wow, my slide got, but essentially, yeah, we wanted to make sure that we were able to pull different experts together and have something that was really strong in between the technology and AI team where I sit, as well as strategy, SEO, content strategy, earned media, and content creation. So I'll dive into what that looks like here. Our approach for geo research is, on the one hand, trying to understand what our brands or what our clients are interested in. What are the topics that are most relevant for them? Who are their key audiences? And how do we create prompts that are going to speak to those? From there, we put those in different LLMs. And so the main LLMs of interest are actually also going to be shifting a little bit based on who the client is. But from that, we go into aggregated LLM outputs. And that's where we try to understand what is the visibility. So how often are they showing up in LLM responses? What's the sentiment? So when they show up in a response, are they regarded in a positive, negative, or neutral light? And ultimately, what are the citations and domains that are influencing those responses? And that's the most important part, because that's really what we can influence in the communication and content strategy. So the last piece is strategic and tactical action based on that. So our framework for activation is, on the one hand, getting all of those insights, understanding how they're performing with those metrics that I just mentioned. So visibility, topic analysis, sentiment analysis, and citations. Then we move into the strategic work. So that's looking at both owned, which is anything that the brand itself is producing content-wise. So let's say anything that exists on their website, and earned, which is going to be any like publishers or anything that we're going to market with a partner. And from that, we go into geo in-market activation, which is the deployment of content. And based on that, we'll have measurement and impact assessment. What we believe in is ongoing monitoring, because we're seeing these massive shifts, constant new models coming to light. And we really want to make sure that we're at the forefront of what's happening and how our brands are performing. Having agility in these strategies is so vital today. And I think that that's something that you also have to be mindful of, even as you're building trust in between yourself as a communicator and your brand, your client, etc. So diving a little bit deeper into what we actually do from a content deployment standpoint. On the one hand, for owned, we think about how can we be optimizing it from a strategic standpoint. So increasing clarity, making sure that has the right structure to be pulled into LLMs. Also thinking about how we can be grounding it in credibility. That means thinking about having high authority articles with experts, or having verifiable data and metrics that we can be including, also designing it for discoverability. Then we move into building connection. And so we really want to make sure that we're prioritizing accessibility with robot text formatting. And we also go into earned, which is, as I mentioned, thinking about, who are the main journalists that we want to be thinking about? And how can we make sure that X brand is being included in, let's say, a top 10 listicle or something like that. That tends to be really important. And especially, I think, the role of PR in GEO is so vital because earned tends to be the most important or most influential citation source for LLMs. Something that I want to note here as well is that LLM, as well as most PR firms, have a pact of not changing the data that exists on Wikipedia. And I think that that's a really important way that PR firms actually create trust with consumers. And so although Wikipedia is a pretty sizable influence on LLMs, we don't touch that because we believe that that would corrode the trust of the page overall. And thinking back at, so how do we create something that is building trust, not only from an organizational standpoint, so having human in the loop decision making, for instance, means that internally within Edelman, we were able to have greater adoption. We got people excited about the solution. We also want to be creating trust with our brands that we're partnering with or our clients. And so that we do through transparency. Transparency is done on the one hand through upskilling internally. And I appreciate that you're all upskilling yourselves now, so that's great. But also we want to make sure that we're educating our clients so that they know what we're doing and why we're doing it. Ultimately, we also want to make sure that we have governance structures in place. So for instance, what we do with Wikipedia, which allows us to have greater trust when it comes to the connection with the end consumer. So this then takes the conversation back to all of you as the future of communication. So we've seen this structural shift that's occurring where AI has changed the way that we absorb information. And machines are not only influencing what is becoming visible to people, but also what becomes believable. I think our response here is really to identify that the tools are constantly going to be evolving, but the responsibility will not. And on this point, there's actually a BCG study that just came out yesterday that explains that 50 to 55% of the workforce is going to be reshaped. Now, reshaped doesn't mean displaced, right? And I think it's so important to think about how you're using AI in your work and leveraging it, because if you don't, you're going to be left behind. And so that's especially true as we're moving from experimentation with AI to infrastructure, where AI is being embedded in the actual work that we're doing and in the institutions that are governing the way that we operate as a society. AI is now also not only shaping visibility, it's also shaping narrative and trust. And I think that that's your role as you think about leveraging it. So we see that AI is amplifying anything that you do. So a weak strategy is going to be amplified by AI just as well as a positive one will. Influence travels faster and further than it ever has before, but that also means that errors are scaling at the same rate as insights. My call to action for all of you is really to think about what type of solutions you think are going to be valuable and what do you want to be bringing to market? And how can you be a driver of trust in a world of increasing doubt? So the opportunity really at hand is to think about how AI is enabling new forms of insights, of creativity, as well as strategy, but also how communicators have now a chance to be reshaping how trust is evolving. And really thinking about how trust has become the most valuable currency in the midst of the abundance of information we have today. So ultimately, the responsibility of communication and of communicators is not only reshaping the narratives that are being propagated, but more so of safeguarding the trust that we have and hopefully increasing it moving forward. Thank you so much.
So we have questions? Yes.
One of the things about the AI age is that what used to take in industries, even fast moving industries, 2 or 3 years before a new innovation. Maybe in the past it was 10 years. Now it's months, and sometimes you see weekly reports saying how everything changed this week. So with that moving target, where you're in an industry that has to tap AI for its clients, and then you have all your clients freaking out about how rapidly things are changing, how do you kind of time where AI might be in 6 months when you're making a presentation based on technology and opportunities and challenges that are related to today, when the people listening know that next week is going to be totally different, and yet you're saying, here's a solution? How do you think ahead of where the puck is heading?
That's a fantastic question. Candidly, right, we can make assumptions based on the data that we have on hand. And I won't have the gravitas to say that I know where everything is headed with AI, but I think that that's also it speaks to the necessity of having agile workplaces. Even the way that we construct our solutions is much more focused on agility now, as opposed to what we've done traditionally, because we're not working with Fortune 500s in building out our solutions. We're actually working with startups. And these startups, the way they operate might change, 1 week to the next. And so I think that working at a larger organization like Edelman with these smaller players means that there needs to be a form of agility that's created. We often actually speak internally about having almost a startup within Edelman, and that's definitely what I've observed. So especially, if you think about the expansion from 10 people to 965, I think that it speaks to this willingness or ability to be shifting things relatively quickly. I think it's a great question, and in short, I think the answer is you don't know what's going to happen in the future. However, you can best position yourself to make tactical shifts as needed, and that's the approach that we take.
Yeah, it's how you do your work, and to be ready to act like a very small company that's agile. Just like students have to, you don't know what's coming, right? You have to be agile and open to everything. You're not going to know everything because things are changing so fast.
Yeah.
But if you're sitting there saying, well, we're really big and we move slow, or this is really scary, the train's left the station.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Can you tell everybody again how many people were added to your organization?
Yeah, sure. So
It's fabulous.
yeah. So we
Started with 10,
started off with 10. So that was my first year. By the end of my first year, we were 65. So that was already rather massive expansion. And then we absorbed 900.
Yeah.
So that wasn't 900 net new jobs. That was 900 from the data team. But the shift within the organization to put the data team under the AI team, which historically, right, was so much smaller, I think speaks to the momentum that we're driving towards. And I've worked at other organizations prior to Edelman that were in finance or consulting, where I think that sentiment was already shared, and that was, I don't know, 9 years ago. So I think it's been a momentum that's just ballooned in recent years with generative AI become common in the marketplace.
Yeah, and you're speaking to a room. How many people are worried about AI taking your job or your position or getting there before you have a chance to graduate with your graduate degree? Right? So the fact that your job didn't exist, can you talk a little bit about how jobs are changing and evolving? That's really important for folks. They're getting this graduate degree and they're getting it because they want to get the best jobs and they're most capable. And yet all we're hearing about is
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, and I completely understand the concern. I recently read, so there's a MIT professor called David Otter who said that he actually believes that AI is going to be increasing the middle class because it allows us to democratize kind of the jobs that were initially thought of as being at really the top of any field. So if we think about it, now with AI, you can have a nurse practitioner that has the ability to make this similar or almost same calls as a doctor would make traditionally. I think the same happens for communications, and I think that that's true across a lot of industries. That being said, of course, there's going to be things being shaken up, and I think that the BCG study that I mentioned also speaks to that. And it's, again, right, like I speak about agility within our working environment. I think that agility within the way you move in your career and you think about information, I think that it's fantastic that you're also putting yourself in a position where you're learning about AI. I think that that's what's really at the forefront. We were talking about this before the talk, but people that have an aversity to adoption of AI are really the ones that end up being left behind, unfortunately.
I was talking about the theory of diffusion. This is not a time to be a laggard. So you got to get away from that and, you know, convince yourself and see that the train has left the station. If you're waiting around and saying, well, I want to find something that's comfortable, if you're not using it, you have to make yourself really go through that door. In fact, I saw Richard Edelman speak just a few weeks ago, and he was talking about it. If you students are not using, they are using it in the workplace. You can see that they are very serious about it at Edelman. And so you need to be using it here. But you also need to use your own mind for critical thinking, understand strategy. Again, it's not those decisions that you heard about what's trustworthy or not is not coming from AI. That's human decision making, right? Talk a little. Students, you have other questions too? I'll sit up here and talk to Julia all day. I have a zillion questions. Yeah, go ahead.
I was wondering, do you have any recommendations when you join a company that is a little bit hesitant on using LLMs? How, as like someone specifically a bit younger, and like when you join a company where some of like the more senior people are like somewhat scared, do you have recommendations on how to convince them that you need to jump the train?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily recommend, trying to bulldoze their culture on day one. Like,
Day two.
Yeah, maybe, I think so. No, I mean, I think that, right, you want to have grit that you're bringing into your work. And so ideally you have a vision for what that company is headed towards. And I think that a reluctance to adopt AI means that they're going to be lagging behind. So ideally, you're able to communicate that in a way that makes them excited about the adoption of AI. That being said, I also want to be mindful of human in the loop. And at the end of the day, we need to have experts that are willing and able to actually look at the information that's being outputted. I think that where AI, for me at least, becomes really scary is when it's blindly followed. And we don't want to be living in a world of AI dogma. And so I think that keeping critical thinking and just thinking about how can it be augmenting the work that you're doing? How can it be augmenting the way that you go about your day-to-day? That's probably the best way forward. If you think about it as an end-all be-all, that typically does not end very well in my experience, what I've seen.
I imagine there is a cost associated to improve a GEO and bandwidth and intentionality at a company to do this. How do you ensure the results still reflect a plurality of voices and not just the companies that can afford Edelman services?
I mean, that's a great question. What we see for GEO on the one hand is that so LLMs have a higher purchase intent typically, as opposed to traditional search. And so we're seeing the ROI be there for the companies that we're working with. then candidly, I'm not the one who's choosing who Edelman as a firm works with, but I think that a lot of the learnings from GEO can be used with smaller firms as well. Edelman specifically focuses more on Fortune 500s, but we do also work increasingly with smaller organizations, and we do a lot of work with NGOs as well as increasingly with startups. So we're expanding that to all types of organizations of different sizes, even though historically we've worked mainly with large multinational organizations and companies. Yeah.
I know Professor John's class only has 5 more minutes here.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, that's Professor John.
Yeah.
I teach digital marketing, but I also teach search marketing here. So
I mean-
number one, love the presentation.
Great.
Can I steal it?
Yeah, it's like,
Or would you be willing to come and be a guest speaker in one of my classes?
yeah, I love that.
And so you talked a lot about earned and,
Yeah.
but especially in terms of building trust, right? We know organic content gets clicks, even though the clicks are diminishing now.
Right.
What do you guys at Edelman see about, hey, now that it's integrated in ChatGPT and LLMs?
Yeah,
In terms of like generating trust, increasing it.
It's a great question. I was just on a call with OpenAI recently, so I was discussing the inclusion of ads. It's still in beta, so they have very limited data on actually what it's looking like and what the ROI has been. From my understanding, so far it hasn't really netted in something that's really beneficial to companies from an ROI standpoint. But of course, it's still in beta. What I have noticed though is that yes, trust has significantly decreased. And I think that the disparity in between the leadership at OpenAI versus Anthropic has really shown that bifurcation. And yeah, people are just pro Anthropic these days.
Thank you.
Question?
Yeah, an online question.
Sure,
Uh,
Martha.
I'm Kevin. He said, working in mergers and acquisitions, we have seen AI in almost every aspect of our day-to-day, both positively and negatively. Negatively, we are often seeing inaccurate information presented as true. What best practices can be implemented to ensure accurate information?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's where the necessity for expertise is still so vital. So although you have so much more information that is readily available to the general populace, you can't really get around misinformation or hallucination today. And so the only way to really try to deal with that, I think, is having the right experts that are coming in and confirming the output of the data. And so it's a little bit more analog, but it's also why we have this human in the loop design at Edelman.
One more question.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Julia. My name is Peng. I looked you up on LinkedIn. I already sent you an invitation to connect. I saw on your LinkedIn that you started as a consulting analyst and now work AI integration lead. It's a job that didn't exist before. So my question is, since people couldn't have had direct experience in it, what qualities help you make that transition from consulting analyst to AI integration lead? And when your team looks at candidates today, what skills or attributes tend to stand out the most?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I actually studied at NYU. I did behavioral economics and AI. And the reason I even got into AI, this is like 10 years ago now, was because I was interested in algorithmic bias. And going from that into the workforce, I was mainly working actually in finance while I was still in school. And then I shifted into but it was always finance and engineering, so kind of this intersection of finance and tech. And then I joined Accenture. I was working as a part of their AI team and worked with Google for 3 years. And it was at Google that I was working on the go-to-market strategy for Bard and Gemini. So I think that that experience put me in a position where I was having some exposure to the world of communications and go to market and how to build out AI solutions. And that lent itself to be helpful for me at Edelman. Then when it comes to the the people that we're hiring at Edelman, honestly, it really depends on the role. But I think that, of course, someone who's AI savvy is really important. I think, you know, being aware of what's happening in the world today, having a interest and also just curiosity be learning, because we never expect someone to know everything day one. I think it's more so about having the agency of being curious about what's happening and also wanting to have a voice in that, right? We want to have people that are excited about the world of tomorrow and help us navigate how we're going to be building things out. And then I think also just the ability to be able to wear different hats. I think at NYU, there's a really big focus on interdisciplinary study. And I think that that really lends itself to be helpful in the workplace. So also, thank you for connecting with me on LinkedIn. I'd love for all of you to connect. Definitely happy. We're also hiring at Edelman. So there is opportunity there. And yeah, would love to hear.
Global company. You folks have to leave, right? Professor Dunn class, you can go and we can stay for maybe 1 or 2 more questions.
Yeah, 10 minutes break. You can say when everybody meets a better strategy on 10:40.
Can we take one more question too? Does someone have another? Yes.
I had a question that I'm sure a lot of us maybe like relate to or ask thinking about as well. I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on like AI being used to read revenue and the trust associated with AI being in like the recruitment process?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a great question. I remember that type of automation happening a long time ago, and I think that at least like now it takes into account a lot more nuance. I remember, you know, having friends saying that I had a friend who's in HR, and she said that yeah, if there was something slightly off about formatting, then something would just be kind of X'd out right away. And so I think those automations have gotten better. I think, you know, I think that especially when it comes to hiring, there's such a big part of it, which is also culture fit and understanding what someone is willing to bring. It's difficult to be able to see all of that on a resume, although if a resume gives a good understanding of kind of, or baseline understanding of what someone's trajectory has been like. But I think that, yeah, when it comes to hiring, there's such a need to have also true people connection behind that. One of the main pain points, honestly, I've had in my role has been the politics of getting AI adopted, because especially in communications, you have a lot of big personalities, which is fantastic. And a lot of people that have different voices and they're so excited about what they're building. But I think you want to make sure that those different people are going to be able to collaborate in a good way. And so I think that that's so important to have, you know, that human connection and understanding if a team is going to be cohesive or not. You can have 5 of the most incredible people. If they don't know how to work together, they're not going to build something that's going to be substantial. Thank you.
I think we're good. Thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you so much.